The morning sun cast long shadows across the military training compound as Dr. Sarah Martinez stepped off the transport vehicle, her medical bag slung over her shoulder and determination etched across her face. The dust kicked up by the departing truck settled around her boots as she surveyed the intimidating landscape that would become her proving ground for the next several months. At 28 years old, Sarah had already distinguished herself as one of the military's most promising combat medics, but nothing in her previous experience had prepared her for what lay ahead. The compound stretched before her like a small military city, complete with obstacle courses, shooting ranges, and training facilities that seemed designed to break even the strongest spirits. Concrete buildings dotted the landscape, their windows reflecting the harsh desert sun that would soon become her constant companion. In the distance, she could hear the rhythmic cadence of soldiers running in formation, their voices carrying across the wind as they chanted in unison. This was Naval Special Warfare Command, and she was about to become the first female medic to attempt integration with a SEAL team during their advanced combat training. Sarah had fought hard for this opportunity, enduring months of bureaucratic battles and skeptical superiors who questioned whether a woman could handle the physical and mental demands of working alongside the military's elite special forces. Her medical credentials were impeccable, with a doctorate in emergency medicine and specialized training in battlefield trauma care. She had served 2 tours in Afghanistan, earning commendations for her work under fire and saving countless lives in conditions that would have sent lesser medics running for cover. But none of that seemed to matter now as she faced the ultimate test of her abilities. The assignment had come down from the highest levels of military command as part of an experimental program to assess the feasibility of female integration into special operations units. Sarah knew she was essentially a guinea pig in a high-stakes experiment, but she had volunteered anyway, driven by a desire to prove that gender had no bearing on one's ability to serve with distinction in combat roles. She understood that her success or failure would likely influence policy decisions affecting countless other women who dreamed of serving in elite military units. As she made her way toward the administration building to check in, Sarah noticed the curious glances and whispered conversations that followed in her wake. Most of the personnel on base were male, and her presence clearly caused a stir. Some looks were merely curious, others skeptical, and a few bordered on hostile. She had grown accustomed to such reactions during her military career, but the intensity here was unlike anything she had experienced before. These were not ordinary soldiers, but members of the most elite fighting force in the world, men who had been conditioned to view themselves as part of an exclusive brotherhood that had never included women. The check-in process was surprisingly straightforward, handled by a gruff sergeant who seemed more interested in his paperwork than in engaging conversation with the new arrival. Sarah received her room assignment in the temporary quarters, a small but clean facility that would serve as her home for the duration of the training program. The room was spartanly furnished with a single bed, desk, and locker, but it provided the privacy she would need to decompress after what promised to be grueling days of training and evaluation. After settling into her quarters, Sarah reported to the medical facility where she would be working alongside the SEAL team's regular medical staff. The facility was state-of-the-art, equipped with the latest in battlefield medical technology, and staffed by some of the most experienced combat medics in the military. Dr. James Reynolds, the chief medical officer, greeted her with professional courtesy, but maintained a reserved demeanor that suggested he was still forming his opinion about her capabilities. Dr. Reynolds briefed Sarah on the unique challenges of providing medical support to SEAL operations, emphasizing the need for medics who could function effectively under extreme stress while maintaining the physical stamina to keep pace with operators who push their bodies to superhuman limits. He explained that SEAL medics were expected to be more than just medical technicians. They needed to be warriors first, capable of engaging in combat, while simultaneously providing life-saving medical care to wounded teammates. The briefing included an overview of the specific SEAL team she would be supporting during the training exercise. Team 7 was led by Lieutenant Commander Mike "Razor" Thompson, a 15-year veteran with multiple deployments and a reputation for running one of the most disciplined and effective units in the command. The team consisted of 8 operators, each specializing in different aspects of special warfare, from demolitions and communications to sniper operations and close-quarters combat. Sarah learned that the upcoming training exercise would simulate a complex hostage rescue operation in an urban environment, complete with role-playing civilians, enemy combatants, and the kind of chaos that characterized real-world special operations missions. The exercise was designed to test not only the tactical skills of the operators, but also their ability to adapt to unexpected situations and work cohesively as a unit under extreme pressure. As the briefing concluded, Dr. Reynolds issued what amounted to both a warning and a challenge. He explained that SEAL teams were notorious for their tight-knit culture and their skepticism toward outsiders, particularly those who had not proven themselves in combat alongside the team. Sarah would need to earn their respect through demonstrated competence and unwavering reliability, as any perceived weakness or hesitation could undermine not only her own safety, but the safety of the entire team. That evening, Sarah made her way to the base dining facility, where she encountered her first direct interaction with members of Team 7. The dining hall was filled with the sounds of conversation and laughter, but a noticeable hush fell over the room as she entered with her meal tray. She spotted the SEAL team seated together at a corner table, their conversation continuing in hushed tones as they occasionally glanced in her direction. Deciding that avoidance would only reinforce any negative perceptions about her confidence or commitment, Sarah approached their table and introduced herself. The reception was politely professional, but distinctly cool. Lieutenant Commander Thompson acknowledged her with a brief nod and introduced the other team members, each offering perfunctory greetings that revealed little about their true feelings regarding her presence. The conversation that followed was stilted and formal, focusing primarily on logistics and schedules rather than the kind of casual banter that typically characterized interactions among team members. Sarah sensed the underlying tension and skepticism, but she also detected something else in their demeanor, a willingness to reserve judgment until she had proven herself one way or another. These were professionals who understood that combat situations required absolute trust and reliability, and they were not prepared to extend that trust until it had been earned. Over the following days, Sarah threw herself into preparation for the upcoming exercise, studying the mission parameters and familiarizing herself with the specific medical challenges that might arise during urban combat operations. She spent hours in the medical facility, checking and rechecking equipment, ensuring that every piece of gear was in perfect working order and that she could access any item quickly and efficiently, even under stress. The physical preparation was equally demanding. Sarah had always maintained excellent fitness, but the standards for special operations were unlike anything she had previously encountered. She began each day with a punishing workout routine designed to build the kind of functional strength and endurance that would allow her to keep pace with operators who treated physical excellence as a basic requirement rather than an achievement. During these preparatory days, Sarah also began to observe the team dynamics more closely, noting the subtle ways in which the operators communicated and supported one another. She saw how they anticipated each other's needs, how they used humor to defuse tension, and how they maintained constant situational awareness even during casual interactions. It became clear that successful integration would require more than just medical competence. She would need to understand and adapt to a culture that had evolved over decades of shared hardship and mutual reliance. The turning point in her initial interactions with the team came during a routine equipment inspection when one of the younger operators, Petty Officer Rodriguez, suffered a minor but painful injury while adjusting his gear. Without hesitation, Sarah immediately moved to assess and treat the injury, working with calm efficiency to clean and bandage a deep cut while simultaneously engaging Rodriguez in conversation to keep him relaxed and comfortable. Her professional demeanor and obvious competence during this minor medical emergency seemed to crack the wall of skepticism that had surrounded her since her arrival. The other team members observed her work with growing interest, noting not only her medical skills, but also her ability to remain calm and focused under pressure. For the first time since her arrival, Sarah sensed a shift in their attitude, a grudging acknowledgement that perhaps she might be more than just a bureaucratic experiment. As the day of the major training exercise approached, tensions on the base reached a fever pitch. The scenario had been designed to challenge every aspect of the team's capabilities, incorporating multiple phases of operation that would test their skills in reconnaissance, infiltration, close-quarters combat, and extraction under hostile conditions. The addition of role-playing civilians and unpredictable enemy responses meant that the exercise would closely simulate the chaos and uncertainty of real combat situations. Sarah spent the final evening before the exercise double-checking her medical kit, ensuring that she had adequate supplies for every conceivable emergency that might arise during the operation. Her bag contained everything from basic first aid supplies to advanced trauma care equipment, each item carefully selected and positioned for maximum accessibility during high-stress situations. She had memorized the location of every piece of equipment, practiced accessing items while wearing gloves and in low-light conditions, and rehearsed emergency procedures until they became second nature. The weight of expectation pressed down on her as she prepared for sleep that final night. Sarah understood that her performance during the upcoming exercise would likely determine not only her own future but also the prospects for other women seeking to serve in special operations roles. The military hierarchy would be watching closely, ready to draw sweeping conclusions about female integration based on her individual performance. The pressure was enormous, but Sarah had faced pressure before and had learned to channel it into focused determination rather than paralyzing anxiety. As she lay in her narrow bunk, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. She thought about her childhood dreams of serving her country, her struggles through medical school while maintaining her military obligations, and the countless hours of training that had prepared her for this ultimate test. She had overcome every obstacle placed in her path, but tomorrow would present challenges unlike any she had faced before. The compound grew quiet as personnel settled in for the night, but Sarah could sense the underlying current of anticipation that ran through the base like electricity. Tomorrow would bring the test that everyone had been preparing for, the moment when theory would meet reality and all participants would discover what they were truly made of. In a few hours, she would either prove herself worthy of inclusion in the most elite military unit in the world, or she would become another cautionary tale about the limitations of integration efforts. Sarah finally drifted off to sleep with her medical bag positioned beside her bunk, ready for whatever challenges the morning might bring. In her dreams, she found herself moving through urban landscapes under fire, her hands steady as she worked to save lives while bullets whistled overhead. Whether those dreams represented prophetic visions or merely the product of pre-mission anxiety remained to be seen, but Sarah woke with a sense of calm determination that would serve her well in the trials ahead. The pre-dawn hours brought a crisp chill to the training compound as Sarah completed her final preparations for the urban combat exercise. The mock city constructed for the training scenario sprawled across several acres of the base, complete with multi-story buildings, narrow alleyways, and hidden passages that would challenge every aspect of the team's tactical abilities. As she adjusted her gear one final time, Sarah could feel the weight of expectation settling around her like a heavy cloak. The briefing room buzzed with nervous energy as Team 7 gathered for their final mission overview. Lieutenant Commander Thompson stood at the front of the room, his weathered face displaying the calm confidence that had earned him the respect of his men throughout his distinguished career. The mission parameters were complex. A terrorist cell had taken hostages in a mock embassy compound, and the team needed to infiltrate the facility, neutralize the threats, and extract the civilians without casualties. Sarah found herself positioned at the back of the briefing room, close enough to hear every detail but far enough away to avoid interfering with the established team dynamics. She noticed how the operators leaned forward attentively, asking pointed questions about enemy positions, extraction routes, and contingency plans. Their professionalism was evident in every interaction, but she could still sense the underlying skepticism about her ability to contribute meaningfully to such a complex operation. The role assignments were straightforward but demanding. Thompson would lead the primary assault team through the front entrance while a smaller group moved to secure the rear exit and prevent enemy escape. Sarah's position was designated as mobile support, which meant she would move with whichever element required immediate medical attention while maintaining the flexibility to respond to emergencies throughout the operational area. As the briefing concluded, the team members began their final equipment checks with the methodical precision that characterized all special operations preparations. Sarah watched as they inspected weapons, adjusted communication gear, and coordinated their approach routes with the kind of attention to detail that could mean the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. She followed their example, conducting her own systematic review of medical supplies while mentally rehearsing the treatment protocols for various combat injuries. The mock embassy compound loomed ahead as the team moved into their initial positions under cover of simulated darkness. The facility was a maze of interconnected buildings designed to replicate the challenging urban environments where SEAL teams frequently operated. Multiple entry points, overlapping fields of fire, and numerous hiding spots for enemy combatants meant that the operation would require split-second timing and flawless communication between team members. Sarah positioned herself with the primary assault element, her medical bag secured but easily accessible as she prepared to follow the team through whatever dangers lay ahead. The weight of the bag felt familiar and comforting, a tangible reminder of her medical training and the life-saving equipment at her disposal. She had carried similar bags through combat zones before, but never in circumstances where her performance would be so closely scrutinized by elite operators whose acceptance she desperately needed to earn. The signal to commence the operation came through their communication system as a whispered go, go, go that sent adrenaline coursing through Sarah's veins. The team moved forward with the fluid precision of a well-oiled machine, each operator advancing according to a predetermined plan while maintaining constant awareness of their teammates' positions. Sarah found herself struggling slightly to maintain their pace while carrying her medical gear, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward, determined not to become a liability. The first phase of the operation proceeded smoothly as the team successfully breached the outer perimeter without triggering any alarms. They moved through empty corridors with weapons raised, communicating through hand signals that Sarah had studied but never used in actual operations. The silence was broken only by the soft sound of their boots on concrete floors and the occasional whispered status report transmitted through their communication network. Everything changed when they reached the main hostage-holding area. The scenario controllers had positioned role-playing terrorists in strategic locations throughout the facility, and the ensuing firefight erupted with startling intensity. Blank ammunition created realistic muzzle flashes and sound effects while smoke machines filled the corridors with thick, choking clouds that reduced visibility to mere feet. The chaos was overwhelming, even for operators who had experienced similar situations countless times before. Sarah found herself pressed against a concrete wall as gunfire echoed through the corridors around her. The team members moved with practiced efficiency, communicating constantly as they engaged multiple enemy positions while attempting to locate and secure the hostages. The complexity of the scenario became apparent as additional enemy combatants appeared from hidden positions, forcing the team to adapt their tactics on the fly while maintaining their primary objective. It was during this intense phase of the operation that disaster struck. Petty Officer Williams, one of the team's most experienced operators, took what appeared to be a serious simulated injury while clearing a stairwell. The scenario controllers had designed the injury to test the medical response capabilities under combat conditions, and Williams played his part convincingly, collapsing with apparent leg trauma that would require immediate attention. Sarah immediately moved toward the injured operator, but her path was blocked by ongoing simulated combat that made direct approach impossible. She could see Williams lying motionless at the base of the stairs while his teammates continued to engage enemy positions that prevented them from reaching him safely. The scenario had created exactly the kind of complex medical emergency that challenged even experienced combat medics. The team leader's voice crackled through the communication system as he called for medical support, but the tactical situation made it clear that reaching Williams would require someone to move through an area dominated by enemy fire. The other operators were fully engaged in combat operations and could not break away without jeopardizing the entire mission. Sarah realized that she was the only team member in position to reach the wounded operator, but doing so would require her to cross an open area under direct enemy observation. Without hesitation, Sarah began planning her approach to the wounded operator, studying the available cover and calculating the best route through the simulated kill zone. She knew that the success of the rescue would depend on speed, efficiency, and her ability to provide medical care while under fire. The weight of her medical bag suddenly felt enormous as she prepared to move, but she pushed aside any doubts about her physical capabilities and focused on the life-saving mission ahead. The decision to attempt the rescue was complicated by the ongoing tactical situation and the need to coordinate with other team members who were engaged in their own critical tasks. Sarah used the communication system to inform the team leader of her intentions, receiving a terse acknowledgement that made it clear the responsibility for success or failure rested entirely on her shoulders. The other operators would provide covering fire when possible, but their primary focus had to remain on completing the overall mission. As Sarah prepared to move, she caught sight of several team members watching her with expressions that seemed to combine professional interest with skeptical curiosity. She knew that her performance during the next few minutes would likely determine their opinion of her capabilities and her worthiness to serve alongside them in future operations. The pressure was immense, but Sarah had learned long ago to channel pressure into focused action rather than paralyzing doubt. The simulated combat environment created challenges that went far beyond simple medical treatment. The smoke machines and sound effects combined to create sensory overload that made navigation difficult and communication nearly impossible. Sarah found herself relying on muscle memory and training as she moved through the chaos, her medical bag bouncing against her hip as she sought the safest route to the wounded operator. The role-playing enemy combatants had been instructed to maintain realistic engagement patterns, which meant they continued to direct simulated fire toward any personnel who moved through their designated kill zones. Sarah could hear the distinctive sound of blank ammunition being fired in her direction as she advanced, creating an unnervingly realistic combat environment that tested her ability to function under extreme stress. The physical demands of the approach were more challenging than Sarah had anticipated. The combination of her medical equipment, the need to move quickly while maintaining tactical awareness, and the stress of simulated combat began to take its toll on her endurance. She could feel her heart rate climbing and her breathing becoming labored, but she forced herself to maintain focus on the critical mission of reaching the wounded operator. When Sarah finally reached Williams' position, she found him maintaining his role as a seriously injured operator with impressive dedication to the realism of the exercise. He had positioned himself to simulate a complex leg injury that would challenge her medical skills while remaining conscious enough to communicate about his condition. The scenario required her to assess and treat the injury while under continued enemy fire, exactly the kind of multitasking that separated combat medics from their civilian counterparts. Sarah immediately began her medical assessment, working with practiced efficiency to evaluate the simulated injury while maintaining constant awareness of the tactical situation around her. The training had taught her to prioritize life-threatening conditions while remaining mindful of the ongoing combat that could threaten both her safety and that of her patient. She communicated her findings through the team's communication system, providing updates that allowed the other operators to adjust their tactics accordingly. The complexity of providing medical care in a combat environment became apparent as Sarah struggled to balance her medical responsibilities with the need for tactical awareness. Every few seconds, she had to pause her treatment to assess potential threats or respond to changes in the combat situation. The multitasking required intense concentration and stamina that challenged even her extensive training and experience. As she worked on Williams, Sarah became aware that the other team members were watching her performance with increased attention. The initial skepticism seemed to be giving way to professional interest as they observed her ability to maintain medical focus despite the chaotic environment. She could sense that this moment represented a crucial test of her worthiness to serve alongside elite operators who demanded nothing less than total competence from their teammates. The medical treatment itself required all of Sarah's skills and training as she worked to stabilize the simulated injury while preparing Williams for evacuation. The scenario had been designed to test her knowledge of battlefield trauma care, including the proper use of tourniquets, pressure bandages, and emergency medications that could mean the difference between life and death in real combat situations. Every decision had to be made quickly but accurately, with no margin for error that could cost a teammate's life. The evacuation phase of the exercise presented new challenges as Sarah needed to coordinate with other team members to move Williams to a safe area without compromising the ongoing mission. The weight of the wounded operator, combined with her medical equipment and the need to maintain tactical awareness, pushed her physical capabilities to their limits. She could feel the strain in her muscles and the burn in her lungs, but she refused to show any signs of weakness that might undermine her credibility with the team. Throughout the evacuation, Sarah maintained constant communication with both the wounded operator and the team leadership, providing medical updates and coordinating movement patterns that would minimize exposure to enemy fire. The complexity of the coordination required her to think tactically while maintaining her medical focus, exactly the kind of dual-role capability that SEAL medics needed to possess in real combat situations. The evacuation of Williams had been successful, but the mission was far from over. Sarah found herself positioned at a temporary casualty collection point established in a partially secured section of the mock embassy compound. Her hands were steady as she continued monitoring Williams' condition while simultaneously preparing for additional casualties that the ongoing operation might produce. The sounds of simulated combat continued to echo through the building as the rest of Team 7 pressed forward with their primary objective of locating and securing the hostages. The temporary respite allowed Sarah to catch her breath and assess her own condition after the intense physical and mental demands of the rescue operation. Her uniform was soaked with perspiration, and she could feel the fatigue beginning to accumulate in her muscles, but her medical training kept her focused on the tasks at hand. She used the brief lull to reorganize her medical kit, ensuring that all equipment remained easily accessible for future emergencies. Williams, despite maintaining his role as an injured operator, took the opportunity to provide feedback on her performance during the evacuation. His comments were professional and constructive, acknowledging her medical competence while offering tactical suggestions that could improve her effectiveness in similar situations. Sarah appreciated his willingness to share knowledge and experience, recognizing that such mentoring represented a significant step toward acceptance within the tight-knit community of special operations personnel. The communication system crackled with updates from other team members as they continued their advance through the facility. The scenario controllers had designed multiple complications into the exercise, including additional enemy combatants, booby traps, and false intelligence that challenged the team's ability to adapt their tactics in real time. Sarah listened to the radio traffic while maintaining her medical duties, gaining valuable insight into the decision-making processes that guided elite operators through complex and dangerous situations. The next crisis emerged without warning as an explosion rocked the building, sending dust and debris cascading through the corridors. The scenario controllers had incorporated simulated improvised explosive devices into the exercise, creating realistic conditions that tested the team's ability to function effectively after unexpected setbacks. The blast was followed by shouts and gunfire that indicated at least one team member had been caught in the explosion and required immediate medical attention. Lieutenant Commander Thompson's voice cut through the chaos as he called for medical support to assist with multiple casualties in the upper levels of the building. The tactical situation remained fluid and dangerous, with enemy combatants still active throughout the facility and the structural integrity of the building potentially compromised by the explosion. Sarah knew that reaching the casualties would require her to navigate through unfamiliar territory while carrying her medical equipment and maintaining tactical awareness. The decision to respond required careful consideration of the risks and benefits involved in leaving her current position. Williams was stable but still required monitoring, and abandoning him could result in complications that might threaten his simulated recovery. However, the team members trapped upstairs represented a more immediate threat to mission success and potentially faced life-threatening injuries that demanded urgent medical intervention. Sarah made the difficult decision to leave Williams in the care of a team member who had been lightly wounded earlier in the exercise, freeing herself to respond to the more critical situation developing upstairs. She quickly briefed the substitute medic on Williams' condition and treatment requirements before gathering her equipment and preparing to move toward the explosion site. The weight of her medical bag felt heavier than ever as she contemplated the challenges that lay ahead. The route to the upper levels took Sarah through sections of the building that had not been fully secured by the assault teams. Enemy combatants remained active in several areas, requiring her to move carefully while avoiding detection that could compromise her mission or endanger other team members. The smoke and dust from the explosion reduced visibility significantly, forcing her to rely on sound and intuition to navigate through the maze-like interior of the facility. As she climbed toward the explosion site, Sarah encountered evidence of the blast's destructive power in the form of scattered debris and damaged walls that testified to the realistic nature of the training scenario. The exercise controllers had spared no effort in creating authentic conditions that challenged every aspect of the participants' training and experience. The attention to detail was both impressive and intimidating, creating an environment that closely approximated the chaos and unpredictability of actual combat operations. The scene that greeted Sarah when she reached the explosion site was one of controlled chaos that tested every aspect of her medical training. 3 team members had been caught in the blast, each presenting different types of injuries that required immediate assessment and treatment. The tactical situation remained dangerous, with enemy fire continuing to threaten anyone who moved through the affected area, but the medical emergencies could not wait for complete security to be established. Petty Officer Rodriguez lay unconscious near the center of the blast area, his body positioned in a way that suggested serious head trauma requiring immediate attention. Staff Sergeant Chun was conscious, but appeared to have suffered significant injuries to his left arm and shoulder, while Petty Officer Martinez was alert and mobile despite apparent shrapnel wounds to his legs. The variety of injuries demanded that Sarah prioritize her efforts based on medical urgency, while considering the tactical constraints of the ongoing operation. The triage decisions required split-second analysis of each casualty's condition and the likelihood of successful treatment under the current circumstances. Sarah's medical training had prepared her for such situations, but the added stress of simulated combat and the watchful eyes of elite operators created pressure unlike anything she had experienced during her previous deployments. Every decision would be scrutinized and evaluated as part of the assessment of her fitness for inclusion in special operations units. Sarah immediately moved to assess Rodriguez, whose unconscious state and position near the blast center made him the highest priority casualty. Her examination revealed signs of serious head trauma that would require careful monitoring and immediate evacuation if this had been a real combat situation. The scenario allowed her to practice advanced trauma care techniques while maintaining awareness of the tactical environment that continued to threaten all personnel in the area. The treatment of Rodriguez required her full attention for several critical minutes as she worked to stabilize his condition and prepare him for evacuation. The complexity of head trauma cases demanded careful assessment and precise treatment protocols that could not be rushed despite the dangerous environment. Sarah found herself completely absorbed in the medical challenge, her training taking over as she worked with the methodical precision that had earned her recognition throughout her military career. While treating Rodriguez, Sarah became aware that the other team members were watching her work with increasing interest and respect. The initial skepticism that had characterized their attitude toward her presence seemed to be evaporating as they observed her professional competence and calm demeanor under pressure. She could sense a shift in their perception, a growing recognition that perhaps gender was less important than skill and dedication when it came to serving effectively in combat roles. The tactical situation complicated her medical efforts as enemy combatants continued to threaten the area around the casualties. Sarah found herself working while lying flat against the floor to minimize her exposure to simulated enemy fire, a position that made medical procedures significantly more challenging but demonstrated her understanding of combat medical principles. The ability to provide effective medical care while under fire represented one of the most demanding skills required of special operations medics. Chin's injuries required different treatment approaches that tested Sarah's versatility and adaptability as a combat medic. The simulated arm and shoulder wounds demanded careful assessment to determine the extent of damage to bones, muscles, and blood vessels that could affect his long-term recovery and immediate survival. Sarah worked efficiently to control bleeding and stabilize the injured limbs while maintaining communication with Chun to monitor his condition and provide reassurance during the treatment process. The third casualty, Martinez, presented a different set of challenges as his leg wounds were painful, but not immediately life-threatening. His continued consciousness and mobility made him valuable as an assistant during the treatment of the other casualties, but Sarah had to balance his utility against the need to address his injuries before they became more serious. The decision-making process required her to consider multiple factors simultaneously while working under continuing pressure from the tactical environment. As Sarah worked on the casualties, she became aware of changes in the overall tactical situation that indicated the mission was nearing its conclusion. The sounds of combat had decreased significantly, and radio traffic suggested that the assault teams were successfully securing the hostages and neutralizing the remaining enemy threats. However, the medical phase of the operation was far from over, as the casualties required continued care and careful evacuation to ensure their survival and recovery. The evacuation process required coordination with other team members who had completed their assault responsibilities and were now available to assist with casualty movement. Sarah found herself directing the evacuation efforts, making decisions about movement priorities and treatment requirements that demonstrated her growing integration with the team dynamics. The other operators followed her medical guidance without question, a sign of respect that she had worked hard to earn throughout the exercise. The physical demands of the evacuation pushed Sarah to her limits as she helped carry equipment and assist with casualty movement while maintaining her medical responsibilities. The combination of stress, physical exertion, and mental concentration had left her exhausted, but she refused to show any signs of weakness that might undermine the progress she had made in earning the team's respect. Her determination to see the mission through to completion regardless of personal cost was noticed and appreciated by the elite operators who valued such dedication above all other qualities. As the exercise moved toward its conclusion, Sarah reflected on the challenges she had faced and overcome during the complex operation. The combination of medical emergencies, tactical complications, and intense scrutiny had tested every aspect of her training and character, but she felt confident that she had demonstrated her ability to contribute meaningfully to special operations missions. The respect she sensed from the team members was hard-earned and represented a significant step toward acceptance in their exclusive community. The final phase of the casualty evacuation required careful coordination with medical personnel outside the immediate operational area, simulating the kind of seamless transition from battlefield care to advanced medical facilities that characterized real-world special operations. Sarah worked closely with the receiving medical team to ensure continuity of care while providing detailed briefings on each casualty's condition and treatment history. Throughout the evacuation process, Sarah maintained her focus on medical excellence while gradually becoming aware that something had fundamentally changed in her relationship with Team 7. The skeptical glances and reserved interactions of the morning had been replaced by professional respect and genuine acceptance that she had proven herself worthy of inclusion in their ranks. The transformation was subtle but unmistakable, representing the kind of breakthrough that she had hoped to achieve throughout her military career. As the last casualties were evacuated and the exercise officially concluded, Sarah felt a sense of accomplishment that went far beyond simple mission completion. She had faced the ultimate test of her abilities and had emerged with her credibility intact and her professional reputation enhanced. The exhaustion was overwhelming, but it was accompanied by satisfaction that made all the struggle and sacrifice worthwhile. The aftermath of the exercise brought a strange quiet to the compound as personnel began the process of equipment recovery and mission debriefing. Sarah found herself sitting on a concrete barrier outside the mock embassy, her medical bag finally, set aside after hours of constant readiness. The weight of the bag had become such a familiar presence during the operation that its absence felt oddly unsettling, like removing a piece of armor after a battle. Her uniform was stained with simulated blood and dust from the explosion debris, physical evidence of the intensity she had experienced during the mission. The other members of Team 7 gathered nearby, their own equipment scattered around them as they began the informal process of discussing the exercise and sharing observations about what had worked well and what could be improved in future operations. Sarah noticed that their conversation included occasional glances in her direction, but the nature of those looks had changed dramatically from the skeptical assessments she had endured just hours earlier. There was something approaching acceptance in their expressions, a recognition that she had proven herself under the most demanding circumstances they could create. Lieutenant Commander Thompson approached her position with the measured stride that characterized all his movements, his weathered face revealing nothing about his assessment of her performance during the exercise. Sarah stood as he drew near, instinctively maintaining the military bearing that had become second nature throughout her career, but Thompson gestured for her to remain seated as he lowered himself onto the concrete barrier beside her. The informal nature of his approach suggested that the conversation would be more personal than the official debriefing that would follow later. Thompson's evaluation began with a detailed review of her medical performance during the various emergencies that had characterized the exercise. He acknowledged her competence in treating the casualties and her ability to maintain focus under pressure, but he also noted areas where her tactical awareness could be improved to enhance her effectiveness in future operations. His feedback was professional and constructive, delivered in the same tone he might use when counseling any team member about operational performance, and Sarah recognized this as a significant indicator of growing acceptance. The conversation gradually shifted from specific medical procedures to broader questions about her integration with the team and her understanding of special operations culture. Thompson explained that technical competence was essential but not sufficient for success in elite units, where trust and teamwork often meant the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. He emphasized that team members needed to function as extensions of each other's capabilities, anticipating needs and responding to situations with the kind of seamless coordination that came only through shared experience and mutual confidence. Sarah listened carefully to Thompson's observations, recognizing that his willingness to provide such detailed feedback represented a form of mentoring that was typically reserved for team members who had already proven their worth. She understood that his comments were designed to help her improve rather than to criticize her performance, and she appreciated the investment he was making in her professional development. The conversation felt like the beginning of genuine integration rather than the continuation of an evaluation period. As they talked, other team members gradually joined the informal gathering, adding their own observations and insights about the exercise. The dynamic was noticeably different from her earlier interactions with the group, characterized by the kind of casual banter and professional discussion that typically occurred among teammates rather than the formal politeness she had experienced during her first days on the base. Sarah sensed that an invisible barrier had been crossed, allowing her to participate in conversations that had previously been closed to outsiders. Petty Officer Rodriguez, who had played the role of the first casualty during the exercise, offered his perspective on her medical performance with the kind of detailed analysis that reflected both professional expertise and personal experience. His comments were overwhelmingly positive, acknowledging her technical skills while also noting her ability to maintain composure and communicate effectively during high-stress situations. The feedback was particularly valuable because it came from someone who had directly experienced her medical care under simulated combat conditions. The discussion gradually expanded to include broader questions about the integration of women into special operations units and the military's ongoing efforts to assess the feasibility of such changes. Sarah was surprised by the thoughtful nature of the conversation and the willingness of the team members to consider perspectives that challenged their traditional assumptions about gender roles in combat. Their questions were probing but respectful, reflecting genuine curiosity rather than the skepticism that had characterized their earlier interactions. Staff Sergeant Chun, who had served as one of the explosion casualties, shared his observations about her performance during the triage and treatment phase of the exercise. He noted her ability to make quick decisions about treatment priorities while maintaining awareness of the tactical situation, skills that he recognized as essential for anyone serving in a combat medical role. His comments carried particular weight because of his own experience as a senior enlisted member who had served with numerous medics throughout his career. As the informal debriefing continued, Sarah began to realize that something fundamental had changed in her relationship with the team. The conversations were no longer about whether she belonged among them, but rather about how she could best contribute to their effectiveness as a unit. The shift was subtle but profound, representing the kind of acceptance that she had hoped to achieve but had never been certain was possible given the cultural barriers she faced. The formal debriefing session that followed brought together all participants in the exercise for a comprehensive review of the operation's successes and failures. Sarah found herself included in the discussion as a full participant rather than an observer, with her medical insights welcomed and incorporated into the overall assessment of the mission. The experience of contributing to high-level tactical discussions represented another milestone in her integration with the special operations community. During the formal session, the exercise controllers presented their assessment of the mission, highlighting both the tactical successes achieved by the team and the areas where improvements could enhance future performance. Sarah's medical responses were specifically commended for their professionalism and effectiveness, with particular praise for her ability to function under pressure while maintaining the kind of tactical awareness essential for special operations environments. The debriefing also included discussion of the broader implications of the integration experiment, with senior commanders acknowledging that the exercise had provided valuable data about the feasibility of including women in special operations units. Sarah understood that her performance would influence policy decisions affecting countless other women who aspired to serve in similar roles, adding weight to accomplishments that already felt significant on a personal level. As the formal sessions concluded, Sarah found herself walking back toward her quarters alongside several team members who continued the conversations that had begun during the informal debriefing. The casual nature of their interactions represented a dramatic change from the reserved politeness that had characterized her early days on the base, and she recognized that genuine friendships were beginning to develop among people who had previously been merely professional colleagues. The physical exhaustion of the exercise finally began to catch up with Sarah as the adrenaline of the operation wore off, and her body started to process the accumulated stress and fatigue. Every muscle ached from the demands of carrying equipment and casualties while maintaining constant readiness for additional emergencies, but the fatigue was accompanied by a sense of satisfaction that made the discomfort seem insignificant by comparison. That evening, Sarah was invited to join Team 7 for their traditional post-exercise meal at the base dining facility, a ritual that she had previously observed but never been included in. The invitation represented a clear signal of acceptance, acknowledging her transition from outsider to team member through demonstrated competence and reliability under pressure. She accepted with gratitude, understanding the significance of the gesture within the context of special operations culture. The dinner conversation ranged across topics that had nothing to do with military operations, revealing personal sides of the team members that had remained hidden during the professional interactions of previous days. Sarah learned about their families, hobbies, and backgrounds, information that was shared freely among people who trusted each other completely. The inclusion in such personal discussions represented the final barrier to full acceptance within the tight-knit community. As the meal progressed, the conversation inevitably returned to the exercise and the lessons learned during the complex operation. Sarah found herself contributing to tactical discussions with confidence, her insights welcomed and incorporated into the group's collective understanding of what had occurred. The experience of being treated as an equal participant in high-level strategic thinking represented the culmination of everything she had worked to achieve throughout her military career. The moment that would become legendary among Team 7 occurred near the end of the meal when Petty Officer Martinez made a casual comment about the weight of medical equipment and its impact on mobility during combat operations. Without thinking, Sarah responded that she had actually forgotten about the weight of her medical bag during the most critical phases of the exercise, so focused had she been on the medical emergencies that required her attention. Rodriguez immediately seized on her comment, asking whether she meant that she had literally dropped her medical bag during the operation. Sarah clarified that she had set it aside briefly while treating casualties, prioritizing speed and accessibility over the security of carrying it continuously. The revelation sparked intense interest among the team members, who recognized the significance of a medic being so absorbed in patient care that she would risk losing her primary equipment. The story of how Sarah had dropped her medical bag and instantly commanded the respect of elite operators spread quickly through the special operations community, becoming a symbol of the kind of dedication and focus that transcended gender or background. Team members who had been laughing skeptically about female integration found themselves acknowledging that competence and commitment were more important than traditional assumptions about who belonged in their ranks. In the weeks that followed, Sarah's integration with Team 7 became complete as she participated in additional training exercises and operational planning sessions. Her medical expertise became an integral part of the team's capabilities, while her tactical awareness continued to improve through constant mentoring and shared experience. The transformation from outsider to team member was complete, representing a breakthrough that would influence military policy for years to come. The success of the integration experiment led to expanded opportunities for women in special operations roles, with Sarah's performance serving as a template for future candidates. Her story became required reading in military leadership courses, illustrating the importance of merit-based selection and the dangers of limiting opportunities based on assumptions rather than demonstrated capability. Years later, when Sarah reflected on the moment when she dropped her medical bag and earned the respect of the nation's most elite warriors, she understood that the true victory had not been in proving herself to skeptical men, but in demonstrating that excellence knew no gender boundaries. The bag had been heavy, but the barriers she overcame were far heavier, and dropping both had freed her to achieve everything she had dreamed of throughout her distinguished career.